because nobody would drink this. So it's making its comeback right now across the nation because you need to Google it and watch people take drinks of it. It's hilarious.
Tell me, what's it called again?
Malort. M-A-L-O-R-T. It's quite funny to watch them taste it, put it out.
I bet. Does everybody have their microphone on?
No.
We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order and ask that the clerk please call roll.
Mr. Jim Benage.
Here.
Mr. Jeff Elshoff.
Here.
Mr. Jeff Haas.
Here.
Ms. Betty Martine.
Here.
Mr. Justin Smith.
Here.
Wonderful, thank you. We do have a quorum. I want to welcome everybody to the regularly scheduled meeting of your Bel Aire City Council, those in the audience and those watching at home. Tonight we have a relatively short agenda. We're going to talk about Rock Springs 3rd and Rock Springs 2nd, looking at some paving and some petitions, sidewalk petitions. We're going to look at a zoning map update and also at a charter ordinance affecting the seating of elected members to your governing body here. It's all on our agenda this evening, but we're going to begin tonight's meeting with an opening prayer from Pastor Gary Green. Come forward, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. It's a real privilege to be with you again tonight. Would you bow your heads with me? Dear wise and loving Father, we come before you right now to thank you on behalf of all of you gathered here tonight. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself, for the measure of health that we need to fulfill our callings, for the sustenance and for our friendships. We thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work, for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. And we give you thanks for the freedom to embrace you or the freedom to reject you, and that for your loving nature, you love us either way. So boundless and gracious. Your scripture tells us that citizens ought to obey governing authorities, since you have established those very authorities to promote peace and honor and justice. Therefore, I pray for our mayor and the various levels of city officials, in particular for this assembled council here this evening. I'm asking that you would graciously grant them wisdom to govern among the different difficult interests and issues of our day, that we grant them a sense of the welfare and true needs of your people. Grant them a keen thirst for justice and rightness, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement. Take our community into the future, and we ask for your safety from evil that's in this world. Would you grant it now, Lord, on our community? We ask these blessings in your name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.
Now please rise and join us in the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We can jump right in with our agenda. If there's any agenda additions this evening, we'll move into our consent agenda, which consists of the minutes from our August 20th, 2019 City Council meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I motion to approve the consent agenda as listed and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
We have a first, we have a second. Are there any other questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Item 7 is discussion and approval of our appropriations ordinance 19-17. It's in the amount of $375,848.76. A little bit higher this time. That was because we did some street repairs, which is a thing there. But if there's any questions on appropriation ordinance 2019-17?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to approve appropriations ordinance 19-17.
I'll second.
First and second. Any other questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Citizens' requested appearances is next on our agenda, and I have two individuals who've requested to address council this evening. We'll call them up, and the first one is Bob Graham, and the second one is Roy Figueredo. Come to the podium and state your name and address, and address the council.
I'm Robert Graham. I live at 4322 Country Lane. We're close to Jeff, actually, just around the corner. So I get to see him play with these kids several times every day. Got a nice bunch of kids out there.
I appreciate that.
I went by there last fall, and that little girl was raking leaves. Man, if you could get some grown-ups to rake leaves like that, you could clean everything up.
That's true.
She was serious. I'm here to talk a little bit about the sidewalk repairs going on over there. And I think I told Betty earlier, my hope was that that letter went out to generate conversations among neighbors, because it sure as heck did that. Based on the information that was sent out, without going into detail, it looks like we're stuck in paying for our own sidewalks. Unless I can buy the house across the street that doesn't have a sidewalk real quick, then I'm going to be in trouble. My first issue, and I guess maybe the most important one, is that when the gentleman came out to mark the sidewalk repairs a few weeks ago, there was a light rain falling, and I pulled in the driveway just as he marked mine, and so we had a brief conversation and talked about how this project looked like it was supposed to be done a year or so ago, and then nothing ever happened there. And he said he was remarking everything, and even on the squares on my sidewalk, he said they had been marked incorrectly before. And I've heard from several neighbors that the marks that were put on there this time are different than were put on there a year ago. So I'm not sure how you go about doing all that, but I did ask him if he knew what the price was going to be for the repairs, and he told me very clearly $200 per section. And I remember a year ago, I talked to Kevin when this first came up, and I think he told me that the last time this had been done, they, I forget what that concrete company is, PBJ or PJB or something like that, that they had charged $100 a square, and he said he was sure it would go up from that, but in my memory, I thought we were talking about $150 to $175, something like that. But he was, at that time, which was probably July, he was waiting on a quote, and I never heard back, so I assume we didn't get a quote back, or for some reason or other that project died then. So, I've got one question on the cost. I was thinking it was, a jump from 100 to 150, 175 would be acceptable. I understand prices go up, but the letter says 400, and that lit everybody in my neighborhood on fire. And so I don't know where the $400 came from. I don't know if that's just a maximum quote. It wasn't very specific in the letter. If that's the maximum amount based on certain factors, I might understand it, but I think as citizens out there, we need to know how much it's going to cost before we do it. I wouldn't buy a car without knowing how much it's going to cost me. So that's probably my biggest part there, is where all this came from, how it came about, and there seems to be a real sense of urgency. I talked to the manager a little bit ago, and it sounded like even you agree that that's a pretty short time frame that we were given to address this issue. I have a little different way of looking at it. To my memory, I moved in that house 26 years ago on May the 31st, to my memory, that sidewalk looks today just like it looked back then. So I'm not sure how we got 26, 27 years without anybody ever saying anything about it. And now it's just an urgent thing to get me to pay $400 is what it looks like. So that's probably the serious part of my presentation. I do have some questions. Am I allowed, or are we allowed, to ask the people across the street to stay off on my sidewalk? Because apparently that's my sidewalk. And can I charge people to walk on my sidewalk? And can I charge extra for dogs? The people across the street don't have a sidewalk. They don't have dog poop in their yard. I got to watch where I put my feet when I mow. It's not bad. People do a much better job of picking up after their dogs, even in the last 3 or 4 years, I think. But it still happens. Well, the guys that don't have a sidewalk don't have to worry about it. So maybe I can charge extra for dogs, I don't know. I did mention to my neighbors, and these are my neighbors on the front row, I did consider painting large blue arrows on the seams that go across the street in front of my house, where the school buses jar my teeth when they go up every morning. Just put some blue arrows out there and see if those would get fixed while we're doing all that stuff. I don't know if that would work or not. I guess to boil this thing down, in my opinion, there maybe should have been a little more thought. I don't know. I can't tell you how much thought. You guys know how much thought and planning went into it. But it seems like it could have taken a little more work on the front end, a little more planning, a little better notice, and in my view, a little more transparency. It's just all at once you get a letter. Some people are looking at thousands of dollars to replace their sidewalk, and it just came out of the blue, and you got 2 or 3 weeks to get it fixed. And that's all I got. I appreciate you guys' time tonight, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager, council members, and this attorney. I did notice you're the only attorney here in the room. Is that okay?
Mr. Graham, thank
We
you.
got another one? Okay. So I'll wrap it up. I will leave my questions about barking dogs for another time.
Next, we'll bring up Roy Figueredo.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much to allow me to be here. I think Bob provided all the details, critical details. I will try to give you a little bit more of the history behind this that I know since the sidewalks were marked last year. First, I live at 4310 Country Lane, just beside Bob's and 2 houses away from Paul. When I saw those marks, I think maybe like last year, we all talked about, those need to be fixed. I said, yeah, I agree, they need to be fixed. I think it's a danger for people walking in, and I've been trying to repair it. If you look at those sidewalks, I think my sidewalk is the only one that you see repaired. I buy caulking, special caulking. I take out the blocks, small blocks, and put cement. I've been doing that since I've been living in the house. Once I realized that nothing was done and those marks were fading away, I came here and talked to Keith. And I said, guys, I saw those have been marked. I think they need to be fixed. I agree with that. I told him, I talked to Bob, and he told me at the time that maybe potentially $150 to $170 dollars. And I told Keith, look at Keith, you guys marked 2 of them, but for that price, I'm willing to actually go ahead and, have an extra 3 here and get them fixed. I'm tired of repairing those every other year. $150 to $175. That was my consent. I was ready to put extra money up front to get them repaired. At the time, the statement was, why wasn't done? Because I think he said something about the council changed, and basically, things didn't get through completely. But there's one statement he said, it kind of kept with me, is they were scared that some of the people who may not ending up paying the fee to repair it after it was repaired. It was kind of scary that, we go do the work, but some people are not paying. I kept that in my mind, and I was like, it just doesn't make any sense because, you guys can force it on us to pay, once the work is done. Now, regardless, I remember 2 slabs. I proposed, go ahead, do an extra 3, make it 5 for that price, under 50, under 70, even $200. And he said, okay, I'll call you back later, or talk to you back later. I never heard back until I saw those blue marks, and those blue marks, they went from 2 to 5.5. I was like, okay, he kind of listened to me. He kept that in the memo that I wanted to get them all repaired. And I had no issues, and at the time, I wanted to get the list from your website about the construction, the concrete, what do you call it?
Vendors?
The vendors, yeah, that were qualified or certified for Bel Aire. And I called one, and he said, and I think it was the first one, I just started from the list, there's only 6, I think. I was like, I think it's called Rich Construction. I called him and I asked him, what would be the price to get this work done, for a slab? And, a couple of questions, what the square area? And I told him around 5 by 4, and he said, in reality, it's like around $10 a square feet. In my head, I was like, okay, around $200 a square feet. I think I'm willing to do that. And, stop there. Then I received that letter that shows 400. That to me was like, oh, it's the double what the construction guy just told me. It's more than double that we told Bob last year, 150, 175. At the same time in my head, it was like, it goes from 200 to 400. He told me last year that they're scared that some people will not be paying for that work. Now I was thinking, maybe they're trying to force on other people's, by doubling the price, trying to cover themselves. In case some people did not pay, the other ones, correct, residents would be paying for the ones who are not paying. And that's what's in my mind. And I don't know if that's the type of way you guys work, where you'd be charging 400, thinking, hey, if someone doesn't pay, we're not going to sue him, we're not going to spend any money because, we're getting extra money for the neighbor. I don't know how you guys work. It's just, all those things in my mind kind of, came together. 200, not paying, now it's 400. It just didn't sound good, as an approach. And I asked him, how many bids you guys had? I'm assuming you must have at least 3 bids. You just don't call once, okay, what's the price? You get them since there are like 6 of them, they're certified for the city, all of them, any bid should be good, and the lowest bid, you should be able to take the lowest bid because they're all accepted by you guys, you have certified. And he wasn't able to tell me how many bids. He wasn't able to tell me what was the price. He said, that price, it could vary, it could be 400, maximum is 400. I said, when you make a bid, and you get the company signs a contract, says it could be 200 slab, it's 200 slab. If you guys says 150, it should be 150. Regardless what's happened later, regardless if the cement goes up by 15%. The contract, inside the contract, that's the price, the fixed price. And this is why I was surprised when he said he couldn't guarantee the price, he couldn't tell me how many bids. It just doesn't sound good for, normal business. And like I said, all those, they had no answers at all from him. And the other statement I told him is, when I purchased the house a couple of years ago, I remember that there was something stating that the contract says there actually was an homeowners association, but there was no fees to pay for. And I asked Keith, if there's an homeowners association and it's in my contract, and I need to go back, it's on the safe, I don't have time to go pull it out. But if it says on the contract, when I purchased the house says there's an homeowners association, I'm assuming the price, the cost to repair should be going against every single one of those homeowners associations, not just the one that lives in front of the sidewalk. That's something I'd like to ask you guys to check. Is this true that homeowners associations still exist? And if it's in my contract and I purchased the house, it's still applicable because I never received the letter that says the homeowners association doesn't exist. And then in that perspective, I think the cost should be split across every single one of the homeowners association. So that's just something to check because this was my understanding. I asked about lead time. He said, the rule supposedly it's 5 days. They could make it in 5 days. We must have the things repaired. I was like, how can it be 5 days? I said, one of your, I think it's section 11.3.5. It talks about once you get the permit to do any repair, you're allowed to do the work within 3 months. That's what that section says. And now it tells me, it must be done by mid of next month, or worst case, it needs to be in 5 days. But how can you give a permit for 3 months? Something that doesn't look right there. And it kind of agrees with what Bob was talking about. Sorry, it's good. I know it's here. I think this is all of them. Basically, I could complain about the poop in the backyard, on the yard like Bob, but mine is really the big ones. But I'm not complaining about that. Again, what I'm here is mainly is saying, I was an honest citizen. I came here last year. I feel responsible for the work to be accomplished. I talked to him. I was willing to put extra money, to get extra ones replaced. And I just feel it was unfair to come back, a year later, and doubling the price from 200 to 400. After they told him that it was 200. After I called the contractor, and he said it was $10 a square feet. And then Keith told me, no, already for months now that you guys should repair that. So you should have done that. I said, look, when I called the contractor, he told me $10 per square feet. $200 was close to $175 for me. Why should I worry about getting a permit, get stuff done when I can just let the city do it? See if you guys have more people, it could be cheaper, I'm assuming, potentially. And that's what I told him. Look, if I had known it would be $400, yes. Last month, 2 months ago when I called, I would have requested the contract come over and get it fixed. Because he told me it would take at least a month and a half before he was able to come in. That was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. He told me it was like in the middle of October he was able to come in and get the work done. Because we're so busy. Yeah.
Appreciate you coming forward for that. At this point, I'll open it up. If there's anyone else in the audience who would like to address council this evening, now is the time to do that.
Can I ask a question? Has there been a lot of feedback on the sidewalk project?
We do have a question from the audience about if we've received a lot of feedback. We've received a couple of emails from that, on that. So this is an issue. I appreciate you gentlemen bringing this forward. I do want to point out that the letter, and I actually have a copy of it here. Of course, I just lost it. Where it actually, the letter says, come here. Yeah, insured. So I'm going to use a contractor of your choice, or the city replaces the sidewalk at your own expense. The estimate is up to $400 for each slab. So the $400 is worst case scenario to me, and I'm going to look to our city attorney. She can tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, but to me it's kind of like the back of a hotel room door. When I'm in my hotel room and it's $115, you look at back, it says it can be $400. There's those things that are in place to protect, but $400 would be the highest cost if the city were to do all of that, up to for that. And certainly we encourage homeowners to use a contractor of their choice that's licensed and insured and all that good stuff with that. And certainly, within 5 days, I think that's something we can talk about here as a governing body in the future. Absolutely. Alrighty. Appreciate that conversation. So with that, we're going to move on to, unless there's anything else, city manager or city attorney, you would like to say to that?
No, it's that's something that certainly we'll look at. There were some concerns that were brought that I think we can address.
Absolutely.
So yes, we'll definitely look into this.
Appreciate it. All right, next we're going to move into reports then, and for that we'll start with Councilmember Hawes.
I have no report, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Benaj.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Martin.
The only one I have is we better all wish Mr. Lasher happy birthday tomorrow. I would say everybody else, but it's a policy. Unless you know their birthday, you can't tell it. So anyway, happy birthday, Ty, and thanks for all the work that you do for the city.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, this evening I was going to provide a brief report kind of summarizing quite a few conversations that I'd had with citizens on sidewalks, but I would like to thank the folks that came tonight. I think they covered it pretty thoroughly, the concerns there around the overall cost, the surprise of receiving those letters in the mail, and the time provided to do that. I do think this should be a discussion that we have as a council at our next workshop, and I think we need to review that ordinance and make sure it's still reflective of what we think the city should do going forward. In the absence of that, I think it also might be appropriate for us this evening to pass a resolution deferring some enforcement on that until we have had a chance as a governing body to talk about it. And so I think that's something that we should consider doing tonight.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I just wanted to, I do have a report tonight. I was intending to just mention that I did attend the Chisholm Creek Utility Authority meeting on August 22nd, and that is the CCUA. We had a couple of items that we covered, and I'll just briefly mention those. We replaced the auger in the headworks at the sewage treatment plant. For those that aren't aware, the headworks is the first stage when the sewage reaches the sewage treatment plant. The first thing that is done is any solids or anything that makes its way through the pipes to the plant gets separated out. So it could be wipes, things that don't break down. It could be anything from like little toys, combs. There's all kinds of amazing things that come through the sewer pipe that make it to the sewage treatment plant. Anyway, the auger started to break down, so that was something that had to be replaced. And that's something that doesn't get replaced all that often, so that was just kind of an interesting thing that we had to look at getting fixed. One of the wells, there's a number of wells that feed into the water treatment plant for where we get our water from the CCUA. There are both Bel Aire wells and there are Park City wells. I've mentioned a few before that have had repairs. They vary in cost and size depending on what breaks, but we did approve another well repair to a contractor. There was some computer services that needed to be done at the plant, and then also there was electric motor controller that had to be fixed. That was also related to the headworks replacement that took place. That concludes my report from the CCUA. I did want to just mention, just because since the issue with the sidewalks did come up already, I just wanted to mention that the first I had heard about the issue of the sidewalks was actually when I was on my way to the CCUA meeting, so that's why it's kind of on my thoughts at the moment. And as I had received a phone call from a citizen who left a voicemail earlier in the day, and I was in the process of driving from my full-time job to the CCUA meeting on August 22nd, and I decided to call that citizen to find out, to follow up on their message, because what they told me about the sidewalk repair and the cost and their heightened concern about the very small amount of time to get it repaired, I was kind of alarmed by that. That sounded, it sounded unreasonable to me, frankly. And so I talked to the citizen. They shared with me their concerns in detail. I said I'd look into it. I'm sure that we all have, because we all received at least a couple of emails from concerned citizens in addition to the gentleman that spoke this evening. And I agree with Councilman Smith. We should look at some stay on the current timeline or deadline that's out there, because it does strike me as unreasonable based on everything that I've learned since getting more information about this process and all that. So that's all I'll say about that, other than just I hope we can have more discussion about it. And yeah, that's all I have to say at the moment. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And I have no formal report tonight, other than I do want to thank the gentleman who came forward and encourage other citizens. Your governing body is open, and you can come and address your concerns and ask questions. Not always going to answer them right away because we want to go back and get the answers for you, but that is the way our government works, and you are welcomed and you're thanked for coming and questioning us. The city of Bel Aire is not unique in the fact that we have codes and that we enforce our codes that are out there, but and I'm glad that we have them. It protects a lot of homeowners. It protects a lot of things out there for people that live in this great community, in this great city. But we've heard a couple of council members mention maybe we need to look at, hanging tight on enforcing. I don't, obviously it's not on the agenda this evening, but I certainly would think that's something. We do have a workshop scheduled for next week, and I would be all for that being a topic of conversation at our workshop for that. I think we absolutely need to have some conversation on that. So with that, I'm going to move on to City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to talk to council about our noticing not significant, but some uptick in the amount of DUIs showing up in Bel Aire Court. But before I go to that, I won't give a report on sidewalks, but there are a couple points that I would just address I would address as the public has commented on them. The sidewalks are just very generally, not going into it, very high level. Sidewalk is a public right-of-way, so that no matter who's responsible for maintaining it, a sidewalk is a space for the public to walk through, much like a utility easement that is hidden by grass or a nice landscape, some nice landscaping. That is a utility easement, and the owners of the utility place there may always come onto that property to access that easement. The same with the sidewalk, except it is truly for the public. The Bel Aire Code is rooted in a state statute, so the state statute requires a homeowner to maintain the sidewalk in front of the homeowner's home. Of course, procedurally, as Mayor said, there are plenty of ways to approach that, and as Mayor said, it would be something for a workshop, but the basis of the code is from the state statute requiring homeowners to maintain sidewalks as they are a public right-of-way. So that's just a brief overview on that may address the gentleman's question about if he could prevent a person from walking, even though the question wasn't just, I understand that, but he could prevent someone from walking. Sorry. So that's all I would say. As to my report on DUIs, we've noticed that they've gone up a little bit. Just want to remind residents, DUIs can be extremely costly to freedoms and finances. A DUI is driving under the influence of driving under an influence of something, whether that's an illegal prescription drug or alcohol or a legal drug that has been prescribed to a person. That influence would have caused the person to be incapable of safely operating a vehicle. There are tests that officers do that are tried and essentially true across the country that test whether someone is incapable of operating a vehicle. And just to remind everybody, the penalties for a first DUI can be as high as $800 in fines. There's always some jail time, even if it's a few hours. Diversion may be an option for a first DUI, but it is costly. And the person is also subjected to a driver's license hearing through the Kansas Department of Revenue. And at that hearing, a person's license may be suspended for a period of time. And under that suspension or restriction, the person may be required to have an intoxilizer machine in their vehicle, which is also costly. That's a machine that people would have to rent. A second DUI, whether that first one was diverted as a first mistake, that second one is always treated as a higher crime, and the penalty from that ranges from fines of $1,250 to $1,750, and at least 5 days jail. Insurance premiums usually dramatically increase upon a second DUI. So, and a third DUI may be charged as a felony, and sometimes the Bel Aire prosecutor uses the discretion to charge that third one as a felony just because of the danger, circumstances, and sometimes risk to the community. So what residents can do, obviously, some of the violations we're seeing are people who've taken medication that they've not taken before. They didn't know how they would react to it, so don't take medication you're not familiar with before you have to drive. And always follow the instructions and dosages on the prescription. Anyone out drinking should have a plan. If someone's alcohol level is above 0.08 or a person under 21 has an even lower threshold, sometimes it's only one glass of some sort of alcohol, that person may be charged with a DUI. And again, Mr. Mayor, just because of the time off of work, the adjudication, the embarrassment, and the time spent in treatment, DUIs can be costly, and I would just remind people of that. Thank you, that's all I have.
Well, that's a great reminder. I know we just kind of come off the summer season, but it won't be long before we're talking about holiday parties and New Year's Eve parties. And
Call Uber.
Yeah, or taxi or whatever.
Yeah.
City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to mention for the public's sake, I know council saw this in their last packet, but the city received the Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Award for our 2019 budget. And that's something that I think we've received for the last 5 years. So I wanted to give a big thank you to Ted Henry for his work on the budget. And there's specific things that he has to do to our budget to receive that award. And it's judged by finance officers across the United States. So I think that's a great thing for our city and for our citizens to be aware that our budgets are done in a way that it would receive a Distinguished Budget Award. So thank you, Mayor.
Congratulations again to the new dad. Okay. All right, next we're going to move into ordinances, resolutions, and final actions. This was put on the agenda before the public comment tonight. We're going to talk about sidewalks. This is the developer's ready to move forward with the public infrastructure. We're talking about the third edition over there in Rock Spring. He submitted petitions for the installation of water, sewer, paving, and for sidewalks. I want to remind everybody, as with all projects like this, the costs of these projects are going to be paid via the special assessments on the lots that benefit from the improvements. So that is before us this evening.
So, Mr. Mayor, this might be a great time to, since we've been talking about sidewalks, this is actually how sidewalks get started. So when the city codes do require on certain main thoroughfares that sidewalks be on both sides, because if it's difficult to cross the road without crosswalks and lighting, then you have sidewalks on both sides. For example, Central Park, when you're coming into City Hall, it's on both sides. And then in neighborhoods, then a lot of times it'll be on one side. And then cul-de-sacs usually don't have them because there isn't a lot of traffic. It's just typically just the homeowners that live there. So when the subdivision is platted, in this case, so the roads are platted out, how they're going to be, where the water, sewer goes, and then sidewalks. So in this case, you can see there's some cul-de-sacs, and those won't have sidewalks, but there'll be a main sidewalk along, I believe it's Tobin Drive. And the idea is to meet up with other sidewalks in the area and other subdivisions. So the developer petitions to have all that installed, and the cost of the water, sewer, paving, sidewalk, are assessed to each lot owner. So when the original sidewalks go in, every lot owner has to pay a portion of that sidewalk. Once the sidewalk goes in, as our city attorney stated, then the actual maintenance and repair is up to the property owner that it lays on. But for the initial installation, all the property owners pay a portion of that sidewalk. And so, as you mentioned, the developer is ready to move forward. The petitions for the city to install those, the city issues bonds, borrows the money, gets the bids, and installs the infrastructure. And then after 3 years, there's a temp note, and we roll that into a general obligation bond, and then each property owner is special assessed for all these improvements.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay. We'll start with Councilmember Smith, and we're going to go down that way. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to say that there's no doubt in my mind that sidewalks are good for our community and they're necessary in the neighborhoods, and I'm really glad that we have them because my wife and I, we walk on our neighborhood sidewalks all the time. I do think it's interesting that when they're initially installed, the whole area pays for them, similar to how the whole area pays for the streets. The difference is once the streets need maintained, it's the city's responsibility. And currently, the way that things are set up now, once the sidewalks need maintained, it's an individual homeowner's responsibility. And so I think that'll be a great topic for our workshop. But I am in favor of sidewalks, for the record.
Well, my question was on sidewalks. After these people sell the homes, do they tell, or the realtors, do we ask them to tell them that the property owner is responsible for the sidewalks after they go off of the specials? Because that was the main calls that I got is, well, when I bought this house, nobody told me I was responsible. And a lot of cities, like I think there was a Johnson County one, that Johnson County repairs theirs. Well, Johnson County has more money than we do, I understand, but I think it should be also in our workshop that when we start talking about these sidewalks, that these realtors that come into Bel Aire make sure when these people buy these houses that they're told up ahead, when the specials go off, you're responsible for them. That's all I had, Mayor.
Councilman Panache?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was just a oversight or a typo that we're talking about resolution for Elk Creek Third Water, and it's not Elk Creek, it's.
Oh, no.
Rock Spring Third.
It is Rock Spring, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I just want to make sure that we were on the same page, I didn't miss something here.
No.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I move to accept the paving, water, sewer, and sidewalk petitions for Rock Springs 3rd Edition.
Second.
First, 2 seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Item B is a resolution determining the advisability of making the water, sewer, paving, and sidewalk improvements in Rock Spring 2nd. We just talked about Rock Spring 3rd. The financing piece of public infrastructure is accomplished through temp notes and through GO bonds. This process requires a resolution for each improvement be approved by the City Council. And I'll answer the question now. Yes, each resolution requires its own action. I think we go through that a lot. But so this is kind of part of that legalese that we need to do here for B, C, D, E, if I remember.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve a resolution determining the advisability of making certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of the improvements in accordance with such finding, paving improvements, Rock Spring 3rd Edition, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
First and second, questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes. Go ahead.
I motion to approve a resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, Kansas, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of the improvements in accordance with such findings, sanitary sewer improvements, Rock Spring 3rd Edition, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
First and second, questions or comments on item C? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item D.
Mr. Mayor, I motion to approve a resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, Kansas, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of the improvements in accordance with such findings. Sidewalks improvements, Rock Spring 3rd Edition, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
First and second, questions or comments on item D? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, last one is item E.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Hawes.
I move to approve a resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, Kansas, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of the improvements in accordance with such findings, water distribution system improvements, Rock Spring 3rd Edition, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
First and second. Did you say that all in one breath? That was impressive. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Okay. Kevin, thanks for being here for that. But we're going to move on to item F now, which is zoning map update. There's been a number of zoning changes over the past 3 years, and staff felt it was time to update the zoning map from 2016 to 2019. We did have public notice that was given, and the Planning Commission reviewed the changes at their meeting last month. The map was approved by the Planning Commission and now comes before the City Council for final adoption.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I have a concern with this because it includes Lot 19 of the portion across from the Bel Aire City Hall, and that is the Silver Cottage property, which there's a contract with Silver Cottages to sell. That, as I stated before, is a contract very expensive for Bel Aire. It is worse than a fire sale. The cost of the city is over $1 million. A traffic count of 3,200 vehicles per day in that area is insufficient for support retail development. It will take over 30 years for this traffic count to equal the Woodlawn and 45th traffic count of today on a static 33% growth model. Those are horrible growth models, but that's what that would do. The best case revenue scenario of a $5 million assessed value investment of that property would take 30 plus years to return tax revenues to pay for that $1 million investment that the city is required to do. If we could get a $15 million assessed value investment on the 20 acres there, that payback in tax revenues would take about 10 years. That would probably be a decent deal to do, but the way that the contract is right now, this is very expensive. So I'm going to oppose the zoning change because of the 19, not because of anything else on that map, but because of item 19.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question for the staff, and it is on the item 22 rezoning of lot 19 to R6. When we did the contract with Silver Cottages to sell them that parcel, I remember our contract explicitly stated that we were selling them a commercially zoned piece of land. And I know that when I looked at the economics of selling it to them and the impact of them building a facility there and paying taxes on it, that I was thinking about that as a commercially zoned property tax at a commercial business establishment rate instead of a residential rate. And so I'm unclear, based on the information that we have, how changing this to an R6 zoning might impact the tax basis of the property and how that might impact the economics of our land sale that we've already entered into contract on.
That's one thing I'll have to check into to see if this multifamily is a true residential or if it's still considered a commercial, because that's what I'm not sure about. Because it's the zoning is for multifamily, which allows for the one unit to have 8 separate rooms in it. But I'm not sure, because it's owned and operated as a business, if it counts as commercial or not. So I'll check into that to see which zoning or which tax status it would be.
Mr. Mayor, the only other thing I might add is I did attend the Planning Commission meeting where they talked about this item extensively, and it did pass, but it passed with a 4-2 vote. And I know we don't have the meeting minutes from that Planning Commission meeting in front of us, and so the governing body may want to consider tabling this item until we've had time to get an answer on the tax basis for the lot and until we have the meeting minutes to review that full discussion.
If that's a motion, I'll second it.
I'll make a motion to table an ordinance concerning the amendment of Chapter 18 of the City Code of Bel Aire, Kansas, in connection with the zoning map all within the City of Bel Aire, Central County, Kansas, as presented.
I'll second.
So we have a motion to table this. I just want to ask, is this going to further push back? And we have a commercial sale here that I just want to make sure it's not going to be jeopardy if we postpone this anymore. We've already kind of done that before.
As long the land bank is meeting after this, and that the land bank consideration is to move the closing to November 1st. So if that gets approved, then this wouldn't affect that.
Okay, that'd be my main concern. I mean, this is something where, I mean, bring up questions and say it's going to take all this time because the traffic counts aren't there. Well, we're trying to do something to get that, to fix that, to improve that, and that's where you've got to think outside the box and do something different. Is it a cheesecake factory coming across it that everybody wants? No, but it's something, and it gets something going, and that's the real excitement here for the city that we need to be looking at. And I'm glad that we've moved it forward as much as we have. With this, I think Councilmember Smith brings up a good point about taxes. We want to make sure that's accurate. I'm happy because right now we're not making 1 penny in taxes on that land, so I'm looking forward to the day that it starts returning some on that.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Hawes.
I am also for actually tabling it just because if it does need to be zoned commercial, I think I don't think we should zone it, approve the zoning for the residential if it does need to be, and then we'll have to come back and rezone it anyway. So, I think if Mr. Lasher could give us that information, I'd appreciate that. And I think, setting this up for the next meeting would be prudent.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to add that the spirit of my motion is really just in making sure we have all of the information before we make a decision, to answer that question, and just really understanding all the discussion that happened in the Planning Commission meeting. I think we just need to be fully informed.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Well, Mr. Lasher, wasn't these 5 or 6, 10 homes in front of this doctor's office going to be senior housing?
So the Silver Cottages, yes, they're senior housing, yes.
Okay, so I will recommend that you guys, over there at Catholic Care, we have those homes over there, and they're zoned residential because seniors are living in there. And you need to think about it because now the hospital and the Catholic Care part, that's commercial. But you're either going to have to go to a split lot, or you're going to have to take the residential zoning there to get this doctor to come in. You might think about that.
Mr.
Well, let's go with Councilmember Elsoff.
Thank you. I did have a couple of questions. So my first question kind of dovetails with what Councilman Smith asked, and I think Mr. Lasher's answer potentially answers my question, but I wanted to state my question nonetheless because it's somewhat indirectly different. And that was, I did notice as well that the zoning was going to be changing from commercial to residential, and I was double checking on the map where we have our apartments. All our apartments are commercial zoned, and so I was curious what makes, now my understanding was this property was going to be for a long-term therapy, not necessarily senior living.
Correct.
That was kind of my second question, is it wasn't, I didn't think it was senior living. I thought it was physical therapy recovery living, which is not senior living as I understand it. And that would be, it's kind of a secondary part of my question, I guess. Is it, I was expecting this to be maintained as a commercial property as well, and it wasn't clear to me why we were changing to the residential zone. So I agree with the sentiment to table this issue because I feel like I need clarification on that detail. I'm also sensitive to the issue of delaying this process, so whatever we can do to make that as quickly as possible, I'm also in favor of. That's all I had.
I appreciate your comments, and getting the sense up here, and I think we're all kind of in agreement that this is something that, when it happens, we want to make sure that we have all that information right. So as long as, city managers assure me that this is not going to delay, last thing we want is to get this close for the first time in 12 years to actually have a commercial sale and then to lose it. But at the same time, we got to make sure this is right. So I appreciate the motion. Right now, there is a motion on the floor to table. Are there any other questions or comments before I call for the roll call vote on this?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Can I just
Please.
make sure there's a distinction between the tax status that will be defined, whether it's taxed as residential or commercial? That's the question that's out there. that we'll get back to you on. The zoning is the most appropriate zoning for a mixed-use area. That includes some residential, commercial, which fits within what that entire Lot 19 was visioned to be by council prior. So the zoning issue, I think Councilmember Benaj asked, this was expected to be commercial. The most appropriate zoning for people staying longer than, I believe, 60 days at any property is the R6. That doesn't change the mixed-use nature of the entire area. So I wanted to make sure that was out there, that there are two different, the tax status and then the truest zone are two different issues.
That's what I tried to say, but couldn't say it.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that clarification. It sounds like we have big number 2 for our workshop. That's
well. So we need clarification that this really is the right zoning for the purpose, and then what is the tax status of this?
Well, they'll still have to pay taxes on that.
Yeah,
the
right.
houses.
I understand that, but back to Councilmember Smith's question is it a residential rate or is it a commercial rate? And
On the senior housing, it'd be residential. His office is commercial.
Right. I think your question, what's the best zone and what's the right tax status,
right,
is exactly what you have to answer.
Right. Exactly right. Yes. Thank you.
So since this is an ordinance, but the motion is to table, still need to go through the roll call vote, right? It's not, that doesn't change that.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Benaj?
In favor of tabling? I don't know how I should say that.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Councilmember Elsoff?
Aye.
Councilmember Hawes?
Aye.
Councilmember Martine?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
And I also vote affirmative for that. And we'll look forward to getting that information at our workshop. We'll move on to item G, which is consideration of a charter ordinance exempting the City of Bel Aire. This is from a state statute 25-2120 and amending the section related terms of the elected officials. The Kansas legislature made changes to the city elections last year, that being that municipal elections were moved to November and elected officials would take their seats the second Monday of January. In 2019, the statute was changed to allow cities the ability to set when elected officials can take their seat, which is so kind of them. But, sorry. At our last workshop, the governing body discussed having the swearing-in date be moved from January to the first meeting in December. This allows time for the election to occur and ballots canvassed. And I know we did talk about that quite a bit at our workshop as well. So, is there any questions or comments?
Question for the city attorney. I know we got an updated copy of that ordinance right before the meeting. Could you please talk a little bit about exactly what changed from the prior version in our packet?
Yes, sir. Actually, the subject of this charter ordinance change is to section 2, which addresses the term limits, the start date of new governing body members taking seat. Everything else in Ordinance 17 was appropriate and valuable. So in the first version, I updated the term, taking that term to the first meeting in December, at some point in the first meeting in December, and I kept everything else. So it was more appropriate, just legalese-wise, from an amendment to just changing the one section. So Charter Ordinance 20, to answer your question, I kind of gone around and around. Charter Ordinance 20, the only change between that, the first draft and the second draft, is that everything else, the other sections are all removed from the version you have. So if you want to look at wards or the mayor terms or vacancies, you'll go to Charter Ordinance 17. If you want to look at the start date, you'll go to Charter Ordinance 20. That's the difference. I didn't explain that very clearly, but I can give you more if you.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
You have a question?
I did. Well, I guess just a point of clarification. Did we specify the exact date change? I mean, the wording of the motion doesn't mention it specifically.
Be the first meeting in December.
5.
Right, okay.
The ordinance does in section 2.
I know the ordinance does. I said, no, if we stated it just, because we're going to pass the ordinance with language that doesn't specify it, and I wanted to make sure that we mentioned roughly the date was, first week of December. Okay, that's good. All right, that's all I got. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve a charter ordinance exempting the city of Bel Aire from KSA 25-2120 and amending section 2 related to terms of elected officials of charter ordinance 17 of the city of Bel Aire, Kansas, and providing substitute and additional provisions for the same as presented and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
First and second.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
just a quick question. The motion on our agenda says Charter Ordinance 17, but I have Charter Ordinance 20 in front of me.
That's correct.
I'm confused.
So this motion is to amend Section 2 of Charter Ordinance 17. So Charter Ordinance 20 acts to amend Section 2 of Charter Ordinance 17.
It's like adding an amendment.
Okay.
And that's all it does. So
Okay.
that actually helped me crystallize my answer even better. So thank you for that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before, again, with this being an ordinance, we're going to call for a roll call vote? Councilmember Benaj?
Aye.
Councilmember Elsoff?
Aye.
Councilmember Hawes?
Aye.
Councilmember Martine?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
I also vote in the affirmative, so it passes. So discussions and future issues, sounds like...
Mr. Mayor?
Yes?
I was just going to say, as part of our discussion, I mentioned in my report that I'd like us to consider a stay on our sidewalks, and so I wanted to make a motion to add an item to our agenda tonight to consider a resolution to temporarily suspend enforcement action identified in the city's sidewalk enforcement letters until further notice by approved motion of the governing body.
Second.
Okay, hold up, okay.
That's not on the agenda.
Yeah, I know,
So first, I'm making a motion to add that as an item to our agenda to talk about.
Okay,
That's the motion
I guess my
just
only curiosity...
Which agenda?
Because that was back in section 5 at the beginning of the meeting when we were going to add agenda items. So can we even do that at the end of the meeting?
You can,
Because we had that opportunity, that's what I asked at that time. I'm not trying to...
Mr. Mayor, I-
following the procedure.
I thought we were going to
I
talk
think
about
he's
it at
adding
the
it to
workshop
the work. I
first.
think his intent, Mr. Mayor, is to add this to the workshop agenda.
No,
at this point.
my intent is to add it to the agenda for tonight's
To
meeting.
add this
No, you
resolution
can't.
to the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and that's for my question. Can we even legally do that without it being on here since we've already passed the time where we were able to make additions to the agenda?
The addition should most properly come at determined agenda additions, but Mr. Mayor, it's up to you. I would say it's up to you. It's not the most egregious agenda violation,
Right.
but it's up to you.
I think
Mayor,
we should talk about it at the workshop first before we put it on and then you can ask them to put it on the agenda for next meeting.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a comment?
Please.
I perceive this item that Councilmember Smith is adding is merely a stay on the deadline that is looming over our residents right now, which to my knowledge is September 19th, if I recall. And this motion is merely to stay that deadline. The issue of what we're going to, however our discussion will go on the sidewalks is not the topic. It is merely a stay on the deadline. That I would be in favor of such an addition, but it will not be a discussion about comprehensively how we're going to handle sidewalk issues going forward, just merely a stay on the deadline.
Mr. Mayor, that is my intent.
And I understand that. My concern is we have an agenda item being asked here at the very end of the meeting, basically saying that we're not going to enforce codes. That's a big concern to me because if we're all of a sudden not going to be enforcing any of our codes, I mean, are we legally even able to say pick and choose that enforce this code but not that code? I mean, that's That's where I'm getting, that's my concern right now. Can we even say legally, just don't enforce the sidewalk code until we have a chance to talk about it? Because that to me is kind of what I'm hearing you asking for.
May I make a comment, Mr. Mayor?
Please.
Maybe we are not saying don't enforce. We're saying we'd like to change I guess either change the code or at least this is a big topic right now.
Right.
So I think this rises to the level of I think a lot of residents are looking at us to respond. They're looking at their bank accounts, looking at the calendar, thinking, oh my gosh, if 2 weeks I don't get the sidewalk repaired, what's going to happen? The city's going to send me some outrageous bill. That's what's happening right now. This is an attempt to alleviate that we have a multitude of citizens that
I understand that, and I'm completely sympathetic, and I would like if we could do that. I'm trying to find out if we legally can say that we can pick and choose which codes we're going to enforce.
Just for
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, hold on. Can I please have our city attorney respond to that?
So, can you legally decide which aspects of the code you can enforce? Yes, comma, there has to be certain procedures that happen. So, you could change the code and not enforce X, Y, Z. You could do this. You could. I believe you could use your power to withhold enforcement for a restricted period of time for a reason. That is something you want to think about carefully when you do that, because then when you, as you said, Mr. Mayor, when you do it for one thing, if somebody doesn't like it can be frowned upon by the AG's office for using the power for certain people or giving certain favors. So that's something you want to think about. But procedurally, the best way to change enforcement is through workshops and code revisions and amendments, etc. So,
and that's where I thought and that's my big concerns. I don't want to get on that slippery slope and all of a sudden we have a resident who's trying to sell their house and their neighbor next door decides not to mow their lawn and it's a foot high. The codes are there for a reason. We've heard from citizens, we've heard consensus up here that we all need to address and we need to discuss and we need to look at this. So none of us, I think, are trying to shirk away our responsibility of that. But just to pick and choose arbitrarily at the end of the meeting, all of a sudden say we're not going to enforce something, I'm going to look to our city manager. Seems like now we're looking at, because we're all being put on the spot here, that there's a timeline, a time crunch, that we have certain residents who have received, and this is again to give some context here, that have received letters stating that they need to comply, things can be fixed by September 21, is it, Councilman Elsoff?
I thought it was 19.
19, which, if we were to have a workshop on the 10th, yeah, that doesn't allow a lot of time for that, but basically,
Mr. Mayor, that's the real rationale behind my desire to make that motion was due to the tight timeline. It makes sense to me for us to temporarily postpone, and maybe I should have made that motion earlier. It was my understanding from talking with Jackie that I could do it at this point in the meeting, and so I thought it would be more appropriate to do that, but I may have misunderstood.
and then I may have misunderstood your question as well, so we can discuss it.
and I don't question the rationale. I think it's something we absolutely need to look at. I'm looking at that, oh my gosh, I don't want to get on that slippery slope like what you discussed. You want to talk about double-edged sword here, because we want to do right by our residents, but at the same time we don't want to get caught up in that catch-22. So,
Okay.
Martine.
I would make the suggestion that we would ask staff to ask the person that sent those letters out, whenever she sent them out or he sent them out, tomorrow, if you would look at the letter she sends or he sends and state that we are giving a notice that we're going to look at this, excuse me, we're going to look at this at a workshop and probably have it taken care of at the next council meeting until further notice, not to do anything with their sidewalks at the present time. Now, that would be better than trying to add. I appreciate Mr. Smith's motion, but adding it at the end of the meeting, I'm afraid we're going to get all kinds of slack from that. But I don't know.
Mr. Mayor, for Mr. Lasher, what on that September 19th deadline is that deadline like the deadline to have it fixed and repaired, or does having say a signed bid and contract, knowing that the timeline is crunched and the obviously the way the contractors work, it's never immediate at that point. Is that constitute complying by the deadline anyway?
I think that's a concern. I didn't see the letter before it went out, and typically we like to give citizens, at least 30 days or something like that to do things. So, okay, thanks.
Well, so having a signed bid and contract, is that?
Yeah. So, and that's something that it does talk about. Please respond within 10 days. And then, please respond within 10 days, or inform the city of your decision. You have 30 days to have the repairs made. If the repairs are not made, the city contract will begin around September 19th. It says around. So I think then, what Ms. Martine's saying is that, and I think we're talking about 20 letters roughly that went out, something like that. It's not like 100 or anything like that. So I think.
So there isn't a hard, firm date.
Right. And I think that we could, unless Jackie feels differently, I think that as Ms. Martine's saying, I think I could instruct our staff to maybe send a letter to those 20 or so that got it and say, council's brought up some concerns. They want to look at this. The date says September 20 or September 19th. We'd like to maybe do some more research on this and get back with you on a time and a cost. And because I can see the question about the estimate is 400, and of course, as one of the gentlemen stated that. If we, the city, know that we have 20 property owners that want us to get bids on 200 slabs, then we may be able to get it for $125 a slab. So, but if there's only 5 slabs that the city has to do, then it could be $200 a slab or something. So we could actually call around and get some prices that maybe we could give a better dollar amount than not to exceed the 400. Maybe we could come back with, we know it's going to be, if we do somewhere between 20 and 100 slabs, it's going to be 200 or 175 or something, and give a closer number and then a better time frame as well.
Mr. Mayor?
I may suggest that we maybe look at a brief executive session before moving forward. I think.
Do we have a motion on the table?
We do have a motion on the table.
And a second.
And a second, so we got to, okay.
Unless you were able to get a substitute motion, you would want to address that motion completely before moving.
And right now the motion is to not enforce codes.
It's to add the item to the agenda to discuss temporarily suspending enforcement action.
Take it for a vote. I won't vote for it.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think Councilwoman Martine's idea is a good idea. If the city attorney agrees that that's not an action that would exercise a stay on enforcement, but I don't know what that would be, I'd be in favor. I thought sending out a follow-up letter is a good idea. I'd be in favor of that in lieu of this motion that Councilmember Smith presented.
But right now we do have a motion on the floor unless either Councilmember Benaj or Councilmember Smith are willing to rescind that motion. We need to call for a vote.
Right, or Councilmember Elsoff is proposing a substitute motion to have that. And it's using a different route to
solve our,
rather than imposing it from the bench. It's another
Mr. Lasher,
people have. I would like to draft would simply go to the proper previous letter, council. We would like with that after you with the route we're going, the cost, and the cost for each slab may be not less than they come in at. Is quite a bit, and then so, this is a good time to do the repairs, but contractors are typically busy, so they may not. And so, closer estimate, they should something in, and we could address.
my big concern here was that we put the letter, or my second to the motion, if we're going to
Letter, and we expect to be able to do that within the next day or two.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
well, he was doing the job according to the, but also I still think it's a good idea to send the letter and apologize to the people, but say we will get back. Maybe you don't have to apologize to them because it's their responsibility to do the sidewalks. That's why I don't have one in front of my house. I don't want one.
So right now, the motion has been removed. The motion has been removed for that. Obviously, something we need to talk about. Like I said, I'm not comfortable saying that we get rid of codes for 2 weeks or whatever, but I like the idea that we work with our homeowners. I'm going to suggest that I'm going to ask that a member make a motion for an executive session for 10 minutes for attorney-client.
For what?
To discuss this.
I would ask for that executive session, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to go in an executive session for the sole purpose of discussing the subject of sidewalks pursuant to KSA 754319, exception for attorney-client privilege, and to invite the city manager and city attorney. The meeting will be for a period of 10 minutes. The opening meeting will resume in city council chambers at 8:28.
Mr. Mayor, question for the city attorney on the motion. Is that an approved reason to go into executive session?
Yes, for attorney-client advice, for legal advice.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, for entering executive session, I do not believe I'll be voting in favor of it.
No, we're talking about attorney, which is why.
I'll second it since our city attorney's asked for an executive session.
We will resume at 8:29. Okay. Council just had an executive session. No binding action was taken. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting back to order. The left to discuss tonight is discussion and future issues. We obviously have sidewalks and the code surrounding that, zone and tax clarification on the zone map changes, other items that we need to talk about at our September 10th workshop. And I guess first I should make sure, can everybody make the September 10th workshop?
I can do it by Skype.
Anybody else? No? Okay. Other issues? Does anybody else have any?
Mr. Mayor, I think we might be wise to have a little discussion on backflow preventers. I think there's some opportunities there that we might want to pursue. It may take more than just any workshop to do it, because it may need to do some research, but I'd like to have some discussion about it. Okay?
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
Can I just ask Councilmember Bernage to clarify? Is that additional discussion on top of what we had in our last workshop about backflow, a different type of topic, or?
Yeah, it's expanded. Looking at options and digging into what the letter of our requirements are for that.
Excellent.
Because what I'm hearing, okay, from some people, some citizens and some folks that are engineers that do this stuff, and they say this is a little bit of like looking for the perfect storm that never happens, and these backflow preventers are not really that necessary. But that's not completely true, because there's a federal regulation out there that says you've got to do this. Okay,
That's what I thought. I thought it was a state thing.
We need to make sure that we are following those regulations correctly and trying to be at least a burden to the citizens that we can be, and that's where I'm going with it. Okay.
Thanks for that clarification. I am 100% on board with continuing that discussion. I just wanted to know what direction you were thinking that discussion would go. So, thank you.
Okay.
And we really hope our city attorney's not taking any days off between now and the next workshop, because we just filled your to-do list, thrown it out the window for things you got planned the next 3 or 4 days, because
you can take off at Christmas.
But until the workshop, I think we pretty much, because we just gave you 3 full week projects to research and bring to us, everything. So in 5 days, yeah. We'll do that. Appreciate you. Thank you. Okay.
I'm not saying we'll solve it in the workshop.
Just get the discussion started. Good point. Good point. All right. At this point, if there's any other action or items to come before council, if not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
First and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we are adjourned at 8:32.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
can we take a brief break before landing?